from The Athletic, Anthony Slater. You're there last night, right? You saw it unfold live.
Yeah, it was. I've covered them now 7-8 years pretty intimately, and it was odd. I actually went out to Dallas in the preseason. And went into the Mavericks facility, saw Klay working out kind of in a Dallas gear, and watched them play the Bucks, and it was weird. Even seeing them in the home locker room with Luka and Kyrie, and I think the entire Warriors organization yesterday got that up close, like, oh, this is odd.
Yeah.
And it was clearly strange for Klay, and Klay was very much, in the lead up, like not wanting this spectacle. He wanted it to be about the game. He's kind of in this competitive state. There was a bitterness about how it split up. But I think once he saw the sailor hats and the employees and the celebration, he couldn't help himself. He's like, it is pretty cool to be celebrated in that way.
I was just going to say real quick, sorry, the bigger story to me is that the Warriors won again. That's incredible.
Yeah, they're playing well. The depth's working. And I talking to a few of their players post game. The big thing is, like, they kicked away a lot of games late last year. I mean, they did one here. Remember the play-in game here? It was for basically who was going to advance, and they were up like 24.
And Malik hit that shot, right? Yeah.
Yep. And it was, guess what happened in that game? Steph had a terrible turnover that turned into a Malik 3, and then Draymond Green bounced one out of bounds, and they blew a 4-point lead in the last minute. And that was like one of about 7 of those last year. Where you're talking to some of their players last night, it was like they don't come back and win that one late. They don't come back from 7 in Boston. They blew a 31-point lead in Houston, but won in overtime. And it just, those games are the difference right now between them being 6-5, where nobody would be talking about them, and 9-2.
Yeah. Hey, Slate, so, we discussed earlier the Kings and their 6-5 record. I look at Minnesota, 6-5, bad loss last night, but they got a new piece in Julius Randle. I look at the Knicks, 5-5. I think they got a new piece in Cat, like teams with big new pieces that they're trying to institute. A little bit slow start. What are you seeing with the Kings and as they get DeMar DeRozan ingratiated with the squad here?
Well, the West is just thorny in general, but with the Kings, I don't actually see the DeRozan integration as their issue. I actually, he's been great, right? And I mean, it's, what is he per game now? Like, and it's a consistent 20.
25. Last check.
I don't. When I watch them, it's not like, I don't feel, maybe you guys feel differently, but it's not like late in the game you're like, oh, well, he's still trying to figure out where to be, and him and Sabonis are not in the right. It kind of feels pretty smooth from that standpoint. The thing I'm looking at, and I know you guys talk about this plenty, but I got the stats up right here. 30th in the league in three-point percentage.
Why you got to be negative, bro? We trying to be positive here, kid. We trying to.
Hitting three-pointers would help.
Right.
It helped y'all be a little bit more positive. But, and again, some of that small sample and the various, aspects, but
last is last.
Last. I mean, and look, Orlando Magic, Houston Rockets, Wizards, Sixers, who were playing terrible Blazers. I mean, those are bad offensive teams, and I don't think the Kings are. They're still, by the way, 12th in offensive rating.
Yeah,
juice that up to even mid-tier,
right?
34% from 3, which, by the way, is not that good. I mean, it's okay. Then we're talking about a top 7 offense, and you're probably talking about a team right now that's maybe 8-3 or whatever.
Yeah. So Slates, they got 4 home games coming up here in a row. And they got tonight, they got Suns, and they got Minnesota. And I know it's only November, but how big are these next 2 games against conference foes, the Suns and the Timberwolves?
Yeah, they're big in the sense of, you guys remember the last week last year when it was about 7 teams that were within 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
The Suns were one of them, right? And I really like the Suns this year, but KD 2 weeks on a calf right now. They might kind of come back to the pack. Every game's big. It's funny, you mentioned I was at Warriors Mavericks yesterday, and part of the argument from some of the players, particularly Klay, Draymond, and Steph, not wanting it to be some retirement spectacle celebration.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big game. Warriors need to beat the Mavericks. Mavericks need to beat the Warriors. Both teams feel this could be the difference between the 3rd seed and the 5th seed come April. And I think the same thing tonight. Obviously, there's not a random celebration of an opposing player, but this could matter come April. And certainly, the Minnesota game, as you mentioned, everything is so compact in this West. So it's huge in that standpoint. And, early season rhythm, confidence, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Slates, one of the things we also been talking about is, with Malik out, who's going to step up? How do we get more out of the bench? Or is it just not that good right now and maybe a move needs to be made?
Do you want me to take the negative front? Or
no,
the positive
I mean,
front?
I want you to be real. Yeah.
Yeah. they're thinner at the back, and you saw that in preseason. Remember, because no Herder in preseason, no Lyle. Monk missed some time, and I remember just like the starters would come out hot, and then they would kind of get to the bench, and you're like, oh, Mason Jones is coming in a little early tonight. And, it just feels like that 10th, 11th, 12th type man is not as sturdy as maybe some of their competitors. And then I would say two things on it. Number one, you mentioned we're watching Orlando Robinson, right? He just went through some 3-on-3. Like, can you get a surprise contributor? You know who else I'm looking at, which is very important? Devin Carter.
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
right.
He's talking to assistant coach Jim Morin right now, and it's very individual work. But as we think about where this team could have been deeper and maybe in the future can be deeper, he was the 13th pick. I saw Jared McCain last night.
Man, he's
for the Sixers. 23 points. Could have had him.
Yep.
And again, I'm not saying we don't know if Devin Carter was a good pick or a bad pick. I have no idea.
Right.
But I know that
he's 2 for 2 since we've been watching him, so that's counts.
Let's see. Oh, man, he's looking good.
That shot is looking pretty good right now.
Yeah.
But when they had that pick, you felt one of two things needed to happen. You needed to find somebody that helped this core, right? It needed to be a pretty quick rotation player, or they really talked with Chicago about Alex Caruso. I mean, obviously we reported that back then, and Chicago decided to go with the Josh Giddey trade. But imagine if you had an Alex Caruso instead, or if you had, again, the shoulder injury, they knew about it in advance. If he becomes a great player, then it'll be forgotten. But it's like, man, they could use a Jared McCain right now. Dalton Connect, maybe that was another option. But the other thing is that, look, if he's back in January and he's playing good defense and hitting some open shots, like, they're deeper.
Yeah. Anthony Slater with us, of course, and you're sitting next to not only one of the fine play-by-play announcers in the NBA slate, but you're sitting next to the president of the John Collins fan club.
Okay.
Now, we as fans, we've been wondering for many, many months about what about this guy, what about that guy. John Collins had a huge game last night. Robert Williams III had a huge game. Are you hearing anything at all on the free agent or trade front that might involve the Kings?
Well, it's quiet. It's quiet because it's November. Everybody still is like figuring out who they are, figuring out which direction they're going. Typically, it's why the Towns thing happened right, like literally like 2 days before camp.
Yeah.
Because that's such a it's deadline time in the league. Almost, it's like a fake deadline where it's like everyone. You very rarely see a November trade or a December trade in the NBA.
Right.
Usually, like mid-December. By the way, I think it's December 15th, 14th range is when players that were signed are even eligible to be traded. So that's kind of an important date. But often you don't just suddenly see trades December 16th. We're really talking. I think when Siakam was an early one last year, and Anunoby, like Toronto moved early because they just decided, hey, it's blow up time.
Let's do it. Yeah.
But that was January, and that was early. So to be honest, John Collins, I think Utah will be open for business. I'll say that.
Right.
But I don't think I just don't think that's a mid-November thing. That might be a January thing. And I'm also looking at John Collins because y'all have got me on it. $26.5 million this year,
and then a player
option for $26.5. He's an upgrade on a Trey Lyles, I would probably agree with. But do you want to pay $26 million for a Trey Lyles upgrade? That would be my argument. But again, there was a time. There's a reason he has that contract, because there was a time where he was viewed as like a fringe all-star. The talent's there. Sometimes you wonder about the motor is an issue. I remember I covered a game last year where he just huge play of the game. He gets an offensive rebound, and instead of putting it back up, he flings it into the fifth row.
I remember that
game. And it's kind of head scratching plays. Sometimes when you're watching from afar, you get tantalized by the talent, which is obviously there. The post.
You don't have to tell me. You tell him.
But here's my take on John Collins.
Yeah.
Anthony. Put him in. Look at the organizations he's been a part of. Atlanta, they're not stable. They're kind of a mess. Utah, not really trying to win right now. Put him in a high leverage situation where, he actually knows, we got a chance to do something special here.
Agree.
I feel like we can get the best out of him. Maybe that's just me pie in the sky thinking, but you get him in our culture with Mike Brown, with the system, not asking him to be the man. Asking him to give me 15 points a night, give me 7-8 rebounds. I think he would thrive.
I would say two things. Number one, he's kind of had some nicer moments in his Atlanta days when they were competitive.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, he's on a team that went to the East Finals.
Right.
And he was pretty good.
Yes.
And again, got that contract that now doesn't look like a great contract, but again, he earned it for various reasons. Two, I know they have sniffed around on him in the past. I know even before they made the Kevin Huerter trade, they were kind of looking.
Oh, back when he was with Atlanta,
Yes,
huh?
yes,
Okay.
back when he was with Atlanta before he goes to Utah. So, it's a fair thought. I think in general you're right. I remember that, you've talked to people around the Jazz the last couple of years, and it is in some ways a depressing situation where clearly the organization has pulled the plug the last few years. They've almost been too good the first couple of months.
Yeah.
And that kind of impacts a player's motivation, right? I'm talking about, like I said, you need to have a motor inside and you rebound like you should, but it's like, I don't, half the time you're telling me, in March and April, like I'm not going to be active tonight.
Yeah.
Basically, you're trying to lose games. Like you're trading away rotation players. Last year they traded, Fontecchio in the middle of the season, which was their only wing, and it's like that sucks your energy.
Right.
Where you're right is, John Collins, understandably from a human nature perspective, could come to a winning environment, suddenly have a big role, and be invigorated, and maybe he is playing better.
That's what the hope is for me.
All right,
Slate. To me, the contract's a concern, especially in the second apron world.
And he's going to opt in.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the Kings are they're in a tricky financial situation now that Sabonis' extension's kicked in. Obviously Fox is on a big number. Keegan Murray's coming up to extension. DeRozan didn't come in on a small number. That's almost the Mark DeRozan money, what John Collins makes. So if it was a more appealing number, it's almost why Kuzma's been a name out there because he's on this declining. It goes from 20 to 18. It's so much about contract.
He's a Zach LaVine guy too. So.
I love Zach LaVine.
Talk about
but the contract, though, I get it.
I
get it. When I look at it, Slates, I'm the type. I look at the player.
Yeah.
The contract that's Monty McNair's job. They can figure that out. But from a player standpoint, there's certain guys I like.
I 100% agree with that. But the problem at times with the fans just believe Zach LaVine for this guy. Why wouldn't you make the move? It's to even literally get Zach LaVine, you'd have to pile up enough contracts.
Yeah, that's a lot.
To get him.
That's a lot.
Which would mean there'd be significant players going out the door just because literally you have to have big contracts to get him. The Warriors, for example, were offered. Look, again, it wasn't deep level offer, but this past summer it was Chris Paul and Wiggins possibility for a Zach LaVine. And that was before they cut Paul. So you're basically talking Wiggins for LaVine. And I think in a vacuum, you could make a very clear argument that LaVine's a more, impactful player.
Sure.
Specifically on the offensive end, but it's you're looking at 40-something million compared to 24 million. And that matters. It just matters. It's why Keegan Murray right now is so valuable, right? Because he hasn't hit the second contract.
Yeah. So bottom line, the Kings start making just a few more threes and everything's going to take care of itself, right?
It'll help.
Yeah.
It will help. I think they're fine. 6-5 is fine at this point. This is what the West is going to be, right? It's I think 48 wins could get you up towards the 4 seed, whereas 42 wins you might be out of the playoffs. It's so the margins are so tight, and we're 11 games in, and Fox will shoot it better. I think Fox will play better in general. I think they're going to be fine.
Anthony, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Grilled cheese sandwiches, I understand, downstairs. So that's a preview of the.
That's
with ham too.
Yeah, okay. I like the halftime hot dog. The chocolate chip cookies are legendary.
Okay. Are they really?
Yeah, with the salt.
Oh, with the salt oil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. People love those.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy to. By the way, this is my first Golden One Center game of the year. I've just been swamped with
traveling.
So
and everything.
Happy to be here. Happy to do a little radio in person.
I know.
Yes,
right?
thanks. We appreciate it. Yeah.
People get to see your face on the YouTube chat and everything. Right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to Mike Brown pregame.
How about that?
Do we have a Bradley Beal status update yet?
No, still questionable. Him and Grayson.
That's pretty big.
Questionable.
I'll tell you what, we'll get one from Tim Kempton because he's going to join us
right
just
behind
a second.
Perfect. I'm going to hand it off because he's going to give you an update.
Thanks, Anthony. Tim Kempton from the Suns next with Drive Guys on Sactown Sports.
Stop your grinding with Brooks Night Guard. Are you waking up in the morning with a sore jaw?